I killed 47 men in my lifetime. Some deserved it, some did not. The night she appeared at my door with $2 silver in her palm, I did not know who would become number 48. Her, the men hunting her, or maybe myself. My name is Caleb Harding. For 8 years, I wore the badge of a deputy marshal in Tucson. I believed in the law, in justice, in protecting the innocent. All of that ended on a dark night in 1877 when I fired 3 bullets into the chest of a 14-year-old Apache boy. He was not a criminal. He was not armed. He was running home with a silver bracelet for his mother. I never learned his name. That haunts me more than the killing itself. Now I live alone in a small cabin on the edge of Red Hollow, Arizona territory. The year is 1882. Winter arrives early this season. I feel it in my bones every morning when I wake before dawn. I keep my world small on purpose. Fix fences, haul water, chop wood, stack firewood, check the perimeter. The rhythm keeps my mind steady. The silence keeps the memories from drowning me. Most days it works. Some days it does not. That evening changed everything. The sky burned orange and purple along the western ridge. Cold winds swept across my yard carrying the smell of pine needles and frozen earth. I was stacking the last pieces of firewood on the porch when I heard something that did not belong. Footsteps, uneven, slow, dragging slightly on the hard ground. I reached for the Winchester Model 1873 leaning against the cabin wall. Old habits never truly die. A man who spent years chasing outlaws learns to trust strange sounds more than familiar silence. A figure emerged from the tree line 30 yards out. A woman. She moved like someone whose body had given up hours ago, but whose mind refused to stop. Each step was careful and deliberate. She walked like she expected to collapse at any moment. She stepped into the circle of lamplight spilling from my cabin door. I saw her clearly for the first time. Long black hair had escaped from worn braids and hung in tangled strands around her face. Dust and dried mud covered her deerskin dress. Sweat stains marked her neck despite the freezing temperature. A dark bruise colored her left forearm from wrist to elbow. Near her collarbone, an older wound had scabbed over but never healed properly. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the yard, checking the shadows, measuring distances to cover. She moved like prey that had been running too long. She stopped 10 feet from my porch, kept her distance, did not want to seem threatening. Then she raised her hand slowly, opened her palm. 2 silver coins caught the lamplight. Morgan dollars, minted in 1878. I recognized them immediately. I only have this. Her voice came out rough and cracked, dry from cold and days without proper water. I only need enough water to wash myself. Then I will keep moving. Simple words, but underneath them I heard exhaustion, shame, fear, the desperate hope of someone who expected nothing but asked anyway. She was ready for me to say no, ready to turn around and disappear back into the freezing darkness, ready for one more rejection in what I guessed had been a lifetime of them. I studied her face, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to hold them steady, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of days without real sleep. This woman was not planning trouble. She was barely planning to survive the night. "What is your name?" I asked. "Nalin." Her voice softened, but her body stayed rigid as iron. I thought about my rules.
You're safe here tonight. No one's going to come through this door
That's what people usually say.
before taking something. Well, watch me keep my word. Keep your money.
No strangers inside the cabin, no complications, no connections to anyone or anything. I had built these walls around myself for good reasons. Every rule existed because I had learned its lesson the hard way. But I also saw her wounds. Those marks on her skin were not from falling down a hillside. Someone had put them there with intention. Someone had hurt this woman and she had run from them. I stepped back from the door and held it open. "Come inside. Keep your money." Nalin did not move for a long moment. Her eyes searched my face looking for the trick, the hidden price, the trap waiting to spring shut. When she finally understood I meant what I said, she tightened her grip on those $2 silver and walked toward the door. Her steps were slow and careful. She moved like someone entering a cave that might contain a bear. Inside, the warmth of the cabin hit her like a wave. I watched her shoulders drop half an inch. Her breathing changed from shallow gas to something deeper. The iron stove glowed with steady heat, filling the small room with orange light. She looked around the space. Single bed against the far wall covered with a wool blanket. Clean table with 2 chairs. Tools organized on wall pegs. Water basin with steam rising from the surface. Rifle rack holding the Winchester and an older Spencer carbine. Nothing decorative. Nothing sentimental except for a small wooden box on the shelf that I never opened anymore. Just the structure of a life built around order and routine. Her eyes fixed on the water basin. She looked at it like a man dying of thirst looks at a river, but she did not move toward it. She was waiting for permission. I lifted the kettle from the stove and added more warm water to the basin. Use it, there is plenty. Nalin nodded once. She approached the basin and let her hands hover over the water before dipping them in. A small sound escaped her throat when the warmth touched her skin. Relief, pure and simple. She washed with slow, careful movements. I noticed more details now. The bruise on her forearm was darker than I first thought. Finger-shaped. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave marks that would last for weeks. The wound near her collarbone was definitely from a blade. Clean edge. Deliberate cut. She kept her injuries partially hidden under her hair and the folds of her dress. But I had spent too many years reading the signs of violence on human bodies. I knew exactly what I was looking at. She never turned her back on the door. Not once. Even while washing her face and neck, she positioned herself to see anyone who might enter. That single detail told me her whole story before she spoke a word of it. When she finished, she wrung out the cloth and placed it neatly beside the basin, folded it carefully, as if proving she was not taking advantage of my hospitality. "Thank you," she said quietly. She still held those $2 in her left hand. "Are you hungry?" I asked. Her eyes moved to the pot of stew warming on the stove. Hope flickered across her face, then caution buried it. "If you have food you do not need. I made enough for 2. Old habit." I set a tin bowl of venison stew on the table. She approached like a wild animal approaching bait, sat down slowly, lowered her eyes in a practiced gesture of not drawing attention. She ate carefully at first, small bites, long pauses, like she was not certain she deserved to finish the bowl. Then hunger won over caution, and she ate faster. When the bowl was empty, she pushed those 2 silver coins across the table toward me. "For the water and the food." "I am not taking your money, Nalin." Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. Relief and confusion fought for control of her expression. I placed a thick wool blanket on the floor near the stove. "You can sleep there. The floor holds the heat all night." She lowered herself onto the blanket with movements that spoke of bone-deep exhaustion. Her posture remained guarded, knees close to her chest, hands visible, ready to move if necessary. I dimmed the oil lamp until only the orange glow of the stove lit the room. "You are safe here tonight," I said.
Why do you live alone in such a remote place?
Because I once made a mistake in the dark, and it just...
Destroyed everything.
She nodded once, but her eyes stayed open, watching, waiting for the other boot to drop. I lay down on my bed but did not sleep. I listened to her breathing gradually slow as exhaustion pulled her under. The presence of another person in my cabin felt strange after years of solitude, but it did not feel wrong. For the first time in longer than I could remember, the silence felt different, not empty, just shared. Gray morning light crept through the cabin window. I rose before dawn as always and opened the door to check the perimeter. Habit, instinct, the kind of behavior that keeps a man alive in territory where danger wears many faces. That is when I saw the tracks. Hoofprints in the thin frost. 3 horses had circled my property during the night. They came within 50 yards of the cabin, paused, then turned back toward the northern ridge. Someone was searching, and they knew their target was close. I stepped back inside. Nalin was already awake, sitting upright on the blanket with her hands clasped tight in her lap. Her eyes found mine immediately. "They are looking for you," I said. 3 riders came close last night. They turned back before reaching the cabin, but they will return." The color drained from her face. "How many tracks?" 3 horses, probably more behind them waiting. She closed her eyes, drew a breath that shook in her chest. Broken Claw, she whispered. He found my trail. I pulled a chair from the table and sat down across from her. Tell me who he is. Tell me everything. So she told me. Her father had been a chief of their band, a man who wanted peace with the white settlers spreading across the territory. He believed cooperation was the only path to survival for his people. Many agreed with him. Many did not. Broken Claw disagreed the most violently. He was a war leader, brutal in combat, feared by enemies and his own people alike. He wore a necklace of bear claws around his throat, trophies taken from animals and men he had killed with his own hands. When Naline's father refused to give her to Broken Claw as a wife, the warrior challenged his authority publicly. The confrontation did not end with words. It ended with her father hanging upside down from a cottonwood tree, dying slowly over 2 days while the tribe watched. Broken Claw seized control, and he claimed Nalan as his property. I never agreed, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I never accepted him, so I ran. How did you escape? Pain crossed her face. My brother Natan was guarding me that night. He is 24 years old, a warrior, but still my little brother. She paused. I hit him with a stone when his back was turned. I do not know if I killed him. I ran before I could find out. How long have you been traveling? 4 days, maybe 5. I stopped counting. Why did you come this direction? I thought they would expect me to go south toward Mexico. So I went east instead. She looked at me with exhausted eyes. I was wrong. Broken Claw is a better tracker than I remembered. 3 days passed in careful rhythm. Nalan helped with chores around the cabin, swept the floor each morning, prepared meals from my supplies, mended a tear in my canvas coat without being asked. She moved differently now, still cautious but no longer expecting violence from every shadow. I taught her to handle the Winchester. She learned fast. Steady hands. Good instincts. She had fired weapons before. My father believed women should know how to defend themselves, she explained. Not everyone in the tribe agreed with that either. On the 3rd evening, we sat by the fire after supper. Flames crackled low in the stove. Outside, wind pressed against the walls and rattled the shutters. Why do you live alone out here? She asked. I stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. I was a deputy marshal in Tucson, 8 years wearing that badge. I thought I was doing good work, protecting innocent people, upholding something that mattered. What happened? The fire popped. Sparks swirled upward. 1877, October. We received word that a robbery suspect was hiding in the Mexican quarter of town. I tracked him to an alley behind the cantinas. Dark as a grave back there. I saw a figure running, saw something flash in his hand, metal catching moonlight. I paused. The memory burned as fresh as the night it happened. I fired 3 times, center mass, the way I was trained. When I reached the body, I found a boy, 14 years old, Apache. The shining object was a silver bracelet.
3 horses came very close during the night. They will return.
How much longer do we have? Maybe only a few hours.
Then don't waste any time. Teach me how to fight intelligently.
He was bringing home as a gift for his mother. He was not the suspect. He was not armed. He was just a child running home through the wrong alley at the wrong moment. Nalan said nothing. The fire crackled between us. Did you learn his name? She finally asked. No. His family took the body and disappeared before I could speak to them. I never found out who he was. That haunts me worse than pulling the trigger. She placed her hand on the table, close to mine but not touching. You are not an evil man, Caleb. You are a man who made a terrible mistake in darkness. Those are different things. Are they? Yes. Evil men do not carry the weight you carry. Evil men sleep well at night. On the 4th day, Silas Brennan rode up to my fence. Silas was 58 years old with a gray beard and a limp from a Confederate bullet he caught at Gettysburg 19 years back. He owned the general store in Red Hollow. He was also the closest thing I had to a friend in the territory. His expression was grim when he dismounted. Caleb, trouble coming. I met him at the gate. What kind? 3 Apache warriors rode into town yesterday. Their leader is a man called Broken Claw. Big bastard, scar running down his left eye, wears a necklace that would give children nightmares for a month. My jaw tightened. They killed old Morrison, the blacksmith. gutted him in the street because he would not answer questions about some runaway woman. Then Broken Claw carved a message into the hitching post outside my store. What message? Silas met my eyes. It said, "The gray ghost has something of mine. Return it or Red Hollow burns." Nolan appeared in the doorway behind me. She had heard everything. Her face was white as fresh snow. Silas looked at her, then back at me. Understanding settled over his weathered features. So she is here. She is under my protection. Caleb, Silas lowered his voice. People in town are scared half to death. Some of them want to find her themselves and hand her over. They think that will make Broken Claw go away. They want to give an innocent woman to a murderer. They want to survive. Then they are cowards. Silas sighed heavily. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a wooden box. Ammunition. He set it on the fence post between us. I am not handing anyone over to that monster, but you better prepare for what is coming, because it is coming whether you are ready or not. Broken Claw came on the 5th day. 3 riders appeared on the ridge at noon. They sat motionless against the gray sky for nearly an hour, watching, measuring. Then the center rider started down the slope alone. I told Nolan to stay inside with the Colt revolver I had given her. I took the Winchester and walked to the edge of my property. The rider stopped at my fence. He was everything Silas had described and worse. Tall, powerfully built, thick scar running from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. But around his neck hung a leather cord strung with bear claws. Some of them were stained dark with old blood. Broken Claw looked at me with eyes that held no more warmth than a rattlesnake. White man, you have something that belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. The woman is my wife. By the laws of my people. She never agreed to that, which means she is not your wife. She is a woman you tried to own. His lip curled. You think you understand our ways? You think your laws apply here? I think a woman has the right to say no. That law applies everywhere. He smiled, cold and empty. You imagine yourself a hero, one man, one rifle, standing against the storm. He gestured at my cabin. I have 7 warriors waiting beyond that ridge. Do you think you can stop all of us? I think nobody crosses this fence. Not today. Not any day. Broken Claw tilted his head like a curious predator. 3 days, white man. In 3 days, I come back with my warriors. I take what is mine. And you? He pointed at my chest. You will...
Now that it's all over, do you want me to leave?
No.
This is no longer a hiding place.
Then what is it? It's home, if you choose to.
Beg me for death before I grant it. He turned his horse and rode back up the slope. The 3 figures disappeared over the crest. I stood there until they were gone. Then I walked back to the cabin where Nolan waited in the doorway. He will not stop, she said. Not ever. I know. You should let me leave. I can draw him away from you. Lead him somewhere else. I looked at this woman, this person who had spent her whole life running from men who saw her as property, running from violence, running from a world that never gave her choices. No more running, I said. We make our stand here, together. Another visitor came that night. I heard movement outside near midnight. Grabbed my rifle. Nolan picked up the Colt and moved to the corner with the clearest line of sight to the door. Do not shoot, a voice called from the darkness. Young, male, speaking Apache first, then English. Sister, it is me, Nolan gasped. Natan? A young warrior stepped out of the shadows with both hands raised. 24 years old, strong build. Fresh blood stained his sleeve from a wound on his upper arm. Nolan ran to embrace him. Tears streamed down her face as she held him. I kept my rifle raised. Why should I trust you? Natan looked at me over his sister's shoulder. His eyes held grief that went deeper than any wound. Because Broken Claw murdered my father. I watched him die over 2 days. I have been waiting for a chance to make things right. Tonight is that chance. He knelt slowly, placed his knife on the ground. Broken Claw sent me ahead to scout your defenses. He thinks I am loyal because I did not try to stop Nolan when she escaped. A faint smile crossed his face. He does not know I fell on purpose when she hit me. I let her run. Nolan stared at her brother. You let me go? Father would have wanted you free. I could not say that out loud, but I could fall down and stay down long enough for you to disappear. I lowered the rifle slowly. What do you know about their plans? Broken Claw has 7 warriors, including himself, all experienced fighters. He plans to attack in 2 nights when the moon goes dark. He wants the darkness to cover his approach. Natan paused. He wants you alive. He plans to make an example of you. Show every white settler what happens when they interfere with his business. 7 against 2 are bad odds. 7 against 3 now. Natan picked up his knife and sheathed it. I stand with my sister, whatever comes. Silas Brennan returned the next morning. He was not alone. 3 men from town rode with him. Walt Hendricks, the new blacksmith who had taken over after Morrison's murder. 45 years old with arms like tree trunks and a Remington revolver on his hip. George Polk, who owned the saloon, 52 and graying, but steady with his double-barreled shotgun. Young Pete, barely 22, the fastest rider in Red Hollow with more courage than common sense. Not everyone agreed to come, Silas said as he dismounted, but these men decided they would rather fight than hand over an innocent woman to a killer. I looked at the 4 of them. Men who had no stake in this beyond basic human decency. You understand what you are riding into? This could be the last decision you ever make. Walt Hendricks spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Morrison was my friend. I owe Broken Claw for what he did. George Polk nodded. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are bad. Young Pete just grinned. Always wanted to be in a real gunfight. You might regret that wish, I said. But I felt something loosen in my chest. The weight of standing alone. We spent the day preparing. Natan set traps around the perimeter, using techniques his people had developed over generations. Hidden tripwires connected to noisemakers. Sharpened stakes buried in the tall grass at angles that would cripple anyone who stepped on them. Pits covered with thin branches and leaves. Nalin checked every weapon, loaded every chamber, cleaned every barrel. Her hands moved with practiced confidence now. I drew a battle plan in the dirt. They will come from the trees to the north and east. That is where the cover is best. The south is open ground and the west has cliff walls. We position our shooters here, here, and here, overlapping fields of fire. Walt Hendricks studied the diagram. What about the cabin? The cabin is our fallback position. If they break through the perimeter, we retreat inside and make them pay for every inch. Night fell like a black curtain dropping over the world. No moon, no stars visible through the heavy clouds. Darkness so thick you could feel it pressing against your skin. We took our positions and waited. Nalin sat beside me near the front window. She held the Colt revolver I had given her that first night. It felt like a lifetime ago now. If we do not survive this, she said quietly, we will survive. She reached into her dress and pulled out something small, a string of beads, old and worn, broken in the middle where the cord had snapped. My mother gave me this before she died. It broke when I was running from the camp. I kept the pieces. I wanted to fix it someday when I found somewhere safe enough to stop. I reached into my pocket, found a thin strip of sinew I used for mending leather. Fix it now. This is safe enough. She looked at me with something new in her eyes, something that looked like trust finally taking root after a lifetime of disappointment. She began threading the beads onto the new cord. That is when the first howl split the night. Wolf cry. But no wolf made that sound. It was a signal. The attack had begun. They came from the north first. 2 warriors burst from the tree line, running fast, silent as shadows. Then the scream started. 1 warrior hit Natan's stake trap. The sharpened wood punched through his moccasin and into his foot. He went down hard. The second warrior stumbled over a tripwire and crashed face first into the frozen ground. Young Pete fired first. His shot echoed across the valley like thunder. The fallen warrior stopped moving. 4 more attackers came from the east. They moved in a spread formation, using the darkness and terrain like the experienced fighters they were. Walt Hendricks bellowed a curse and opened fire with his Remington. 1 warrior spun and dropped. George Polk's shotgun roared twice. Another attacker collapsed against the fence post he had been climbing over. An arrow hissed through the air. Walt grunted and fell to one knee. The shaft protruded from his thigh at a bad angle, but the tough blacksmith kept shooting. Nalan stood beside me at the window, calm, focused. She aimed at a warrior who was lining up a shot at my back. Squeezed the trigger. The man fell backward into the dirt. "Never underestimate an Apache woman," she said. Young Pete panicked. I saw it happen from across the yard. Fear took hold of him like a physical force. He broke from his position and ran toward the back of the property. A warrior intercepted him before he made it 20 yards. Pete's scream was short and terrible. Then silence. The battle continued. Gunfire and war cries. The smell of black powder smoke and blood. Then came the fire. Broken Claw appeared at the edge of the yard. He hurled a burning torch onto the cabin roof. Dry cedar shingles caught immediately. Flames spread with terrifying speed. Smoke began filling the cabin. We could not stay inside. "Everyone out," I shouted. "Rally at the fence line." I pushed through the door into the darkness. Broken Claw stood 30 feet away. Firelight from the burning cabin danced across his scarred face. A long knife gleamed in his right hand. Behind him, the body of one of his warriors lay crumpled on the ground. Beyond the fence, I could see figures running away into the darkness. The survivors fleeing. Only Broken Claw remained. "The gray ghost," he said. His voice carried over the crackle of flames. "I remember hearing stories about you years ago. A white man who hunted my people. A man who killed without mercy. That was another life. But the blood remains on your hands. It never washes away. I know this because my hands are the same." He stepped closer. "You fight for this woman. Why? She means nothing to you. She means she deserves a choice. Everyone deserves that." He laughed, cold and hollow. "Choice. Such a white man's word. In my world, power is the only truth that matters. She was going to give me legitimacy, the right to rule, the daughter of a chief as my wife. So your power depends on keeping a woman in chains." The humor vanished from his face. "You talk too much." He lunged. I raised the Winchester and fired. But the heat from the burning cabin had warped something in the barrel. The shot went wide. Broken Claw's knife slashed across my forearm. Blood sprayed hot against my skin. I stumbled backward. He pressed forward. Raised the blade for a killing strike. Then a shadow moved behind him. Natan. The young warrior drove his own knife deep into Broken Claw's back, twisted the blade, pulled it free. Broken Claw gasped, staggered, turned his head to see his killer. "Traitor," he hissed. Natan's face was carved from stone. "Not a traitor. This is justice. For my father who you murdered. For my sister who you tried to enslave. For everyone who suffered under your cruelty." Broken Claw fell to his knees. Blood poured from the wound in his back. I picked up my Colt revolver from where I had dropped it, stood over the dying man. "This is for the boy I killed 5 years ago," I said. "The Apache child whose name I never learned. I cannot bring him back, but I can make sure you never hurt anyone else. One shot, clean, final." Broken Claw collapsed face down in the dirt. The flames crackled behind us. Somewhere in the darkness, the last of the fleeing warriors disappeared into the trees. It was over. We rebuilt the cabin, made it larger this time, added a second room. Silas Brennan supervised from a chair with his arm in a sling, shouting instructions that everyone ignored. "That window frame is crooked, Caleb. Then climb up here and fix it yourself, old man." He laughed. I had not heard him laugh like that in years. Walt Hendricks survived despite the arrow wound in his thigh. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he considered it a fair trade. George Polk escaped without a scratch and never let anyone forget it. Young Pete was not so fortunate. We buried him on the hill overlooking the valley 2 days after the battle. He was 22 years old, brave and foolish and gone too soon. Natan healed from his wounds, but he could not stay. "I must return to our people," he told Nalin on the morning he prepared to leave. "Someone needs to lead them, not with violence like Broken Claw, with wisdom like our father tried to teach." Nalin pressed the 2 silver Morgan dollars into his palm. The same coins she had offered me that first desperate night. "Keep these. Remember that you can start over with almost nothing. Remember that choices matter more than circumstances." He embraced her, held on for a long moment. You found your home, sister. I did. Then he mounted his horse and rode toward the mountains, toward whatever future waited for him and his people. That evening, Nalan and I sat on the new porch watching the sunset paint the western sky. She wore the mended bead necklace around her throat. Each bead was carefully strung on the new cord, whole again after being broken. I held a small wooden box in my hands, the one I had kept on my shelf for 5 years without opening. Inside lay my old deputy marshal badge, tarnished now, heavy with memories. I opened the box, looked at the badge for a long moment. Then I placed the 2 silver dollars beside it, the coins Nalan had offered me the night we met. The night everything changed. What are you doing? She asked. Starting a new collection of memories. Better ones. She smiled. The expression transformed her face. This was not the exhausted, desperate woman who had stumbled out of the darkness, begging for water. This was someone who had found solid ground beneath her feet. Do you want me to leave now that the danger has passed? She asked. I looked at her. This woman who had shown me that redemption was not about balancing scales or paying debts. It was about building something new, something worth protecting. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. She nodded slowly. Then I will stay. For the first time in my life, I choose where I belong. I choose this place. She paused. I choose you. I reached over and took her hand, felt the warmth of human connection after 5 years of cold isolation. Then we build from here, together. I used to believe redemption meant suffering enough to earn forgiveness. Kill enough bad men to balance out one innocent boy. Carry enough guilt to somehow make things right. I was wrong. Redemption is not about keeping score. It is about choosing to build something better with whatever time you have left. Not alone, with the people you decide to stand beside. Nalan found her home. I found my reason to keep breathing. And the cabin at the edge of Red Hollow is no longer the place where I hide from my past. It is where my future begins. Natan returned to his people carrying hope for peace, but 2 warriors survived the battle that night. They fled into the darkness, swearing vengeance for Broken Claw. Some stories end with a sunset and a promise. Others are only beginning.
The story leaves a profound lesson about choice, responsibility, and the true meaning of human salvation. The man once believed that his sinful past could only be atoned for through suffering and isolation. He confined himself in silence, believing that simply surviving was a sufficient punishment for his irreparable mistakes. But the story shows that avoidance is not atonement, but only prolongs torment. People cannot change what has happened, but they always have the right to choose how to live their lives afterward. The woman's appearance not only brings danger, but also carries a crucial moral question. When faced with injustice, do we dare to act or continue to remain silent for safety? The man knows that protecting her means confronting violence, confronting the bloody past he wants to bury. However, the moment he opens the cabin door and says, "Come in," marks the biggest turning point. That was when he chose to stand with humanity, not with his own fear. The story also emphasizes the value of the right to choose, especially for vulnerable people. The woman doesn't need to be saved by pity, but by respect as a human being with a voice and the right to decide her own life. When she says, "I choose to stay," it's not just a choice about a place, but a declaration that she has reclaimed control of her life after a long period of being treated as someone else's property. Ultimately, the story affirms that salvation doesn't lie in weighing sins, but in building something good from the present. True atonement doesn't come from counting the dead, but from protecting what remains, from small but right actions, and from daring to stand by others when it's unsafe. When people choose to build together instead of enduring in isolation, then no matter how heavy the past may be, it cannot prevent a better future.